So, officially, greetings to everybody. It's wonderful to see so many of you. For those of you who uh, don't remember my face now or what I looked like 50 years ago, so for my younger classmates from 70 friends from 77 and 78, I'm Steve Ehrlich, class of 76, and one of the coordinators of our 76Connects program. We've been doing this, I think this is our something like our third season. We do roughly quarterly Zoom sessions with the class of 76. And the whole idea behind that is to continue to enable us to literally connect with our fellow classmates, to have ongoing connections, renew friendships, form new ones, develop terrific conversations, to learn more about ourselves and the Amherst community. We've had a series of conversations about topics on contemporary questions. We've involved classmates to lead panels. We've involved faculty from the college. We've initiated this a few years ago, actually, with Michael Elliott. So we've done a lot, and we're going to keep doing this leading up to our 50th reunion. Speaking of which, you'll hear more about this, but to those in the class of 76, reminder, May 28th to the 31st, 2026 will be our 50th reunion. Hard to believe, but we're excited. Many of those who are planning this are on this call, so a big shout out of thanks to everyone. In particular, you've already received a word from Bob Howard, who is one of the co-chairs of the reunion and is leading the effort on our reunion book to complete your essays by December. So just another reminder to do that. Shortly, you'll be hearing from others on the reunion committee as well. So keep that in mind, folks. Our 50th reunion, we want everybody there. Again, special welcome not just to my classmates, but to members of the class of 77 and 78. This is a very important conversation we're having tonight, and we are just so delighted that we can be joined by so many alums from Amherst. Also, just a quick special
I
welcome.
had everybody, and then I punched on Steve Ehrlich, and I disappeared. Fuck, it's
I'm
almost
sorry
two
about that. You
fucking.
got it
Maybe
now.
Noel can come on.
Special welcome.
All right,
I see her,
Who's this
uh,
guy?
Prof
this is Steve
Professor
Ehrlich.
Amrita Basu.
Oh.
Uh, Professor, glad you can join us. Um, uh, she is a professor of political science, sexuality, women's and gender studies. She's on leave this year, but she has supervised a recent graduate's thesis on the history of coeducation
Oh.
at Amherst. And we may lean on you, Professor, in the future for even more consultation and advice. But you and your students have been studying this topic, so welcome. I'm delighted you can join us for this session tonight. A couple of housekeeping items very quickly. As you know, the session's being recorded, and as I mentioned, it will be available on our respective class web pages. The format for tonight is pretty straightforward. I'm going to turn things over to my friend Wendy Mantel in a minute. And Wendy is going to spend the first 45 minutes or so of this program in conversation with our three panelists. Wendy will say more about them. I know that they've got some pretty compelling, engaging questions about their reasons to attend Amherst to begin with, and overall their experiences then and now at the college. Followed by that, the last half of the presentation will be Q&A. And for that, if during this at any time you have a question, the way we're going to handle this to try to keep things as smooth as possible and given the number, if you would go to the bottom of your Zoom box, you'll see a Q&A tab. If you click that, you'll have an opportunity to write a question. That's the way we're going to ask you to do it rather than raise hands and verbally do that. Write your question. I will receive the questions. And when we get to the Q&A part of the program, I'll do my best to get to as many of those questions as I can. So I think that'll just keep things as hopefully running as smoothly as possible. And with that, I want to introduce Wendy Mantel to everybody. Many thanks to Wendy for putting this program together, for being just a remarkable leader in our class in so many ways, in fundraising efforts and in really being on the steering committee of this 76 Connects program. So again, many thanks to everybody for joining us. I know we're all looking forward to this. Wendy, it's all yours.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Mantel, and I am so excited about this. I was originally excited because of the idea of hearing from some of the first women at Amherst, and 50 years later or thereabouts, hearing what their impressions were of Amherst. But as I got to know a couple of these women, I knew already, but got to know better. And one woman, Helene, I didn't know at all. And as I've gotten to know all three of our guests tonight, Paula, Ruth, and Helene, I realized, as I've always known, because it just hits me every time I'm on a Zoom webinar with you guys, how smart and interesting the people I went to college with are. So I am honored to be moderating tonight with three really cool people, and I look forward to your questions. By the way, if you have trouble finding the Q&A, there is a little icon called More, and if you open that up, the Q&A is right underneath that. So otherwise, if I could just ask that everybody mute themselves, there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. And I'm going to start by just explaining the genesis of this idea. To Steve's credit, Steve called me one day, three and a half years ago, and he said, "I've got this idea. Can I run it by you?" And yeah, sure. And Steve and I knew each other through a now sort of quasi-defunct um, virtual band called the 45s, which we put together for our 45th reunion. But anyway, so we knew each other well, and he knows I like his creativity, and he said, "I've got this idea that as we get older, connection becomes more important. It's like a lifeline, and I'm thinking that it might be neat to do something along the lines of quasi-adult education, but connection, to promote connection among our classmates, especially as we come up on the 50th reunion." And I thought it was a great idea. We did our very first Zoom call with President Elliott, and we've had a whole bunch of different approaches since then on sports, on politics, on academic subjects. Tonight, we're talking about girls, and we're talking about specifically the women who were brave enough to come to Amherst um, at a time when it was a very interesting time for the school. Um, Everyone who is on this call tonight transferred into Amherst, and that's intentional. We wanted to find out what the transfer students thought about Amherst when they came in, before there were freshman women. So the first person I'm going to introduce is Ruth Kremen. I'm going to tell you 2 seconds worth of information about why I came to Amherst, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ruth. I came to Amherst from Vassar, and I'm from the Midwest. I couldn't wait to get out of the Midwest. Vassar was my number one choice, and I was thrilled to be going there. It was a very liberal school. I would say more liberal than I was ready for. And it was coed. Had gone through coed 3 years before. My sophomore year, I had a tragedy in my family that really threw me into a tailspin. And I thought maybe what I need to do is get out of here for a while and just total change of scenery. Found out about the 12 college exchange, and I said, I'm going to go somewhere that's completely different from where I am now. How about an all-male college? And I had no knowledge of anything about Amherst other than what I'd read. And I also knew that it was part of the 5 college exchange. And therefore, I could get classes at other schools and that it would be a really interesting experience. And I will keep it short and say, I believe that Amherst College saved my life. And I'm not joking when I say that. I was in such a spiritual, I was so spiritually bankrupt at the time that when I got to Amherst,
It's 19:15.
not only was I blown away by the beauty of the place, but I felt like I'd found home. And, it's a funny thing to say that you found home at an all-male college, but I did. I found that the culture, the politics, the people, everything healed me. And I am forever grateful for that. And the reason I stay involved with Amherst is because I'm paying it back. So that's my story. Now, let me introduce our friend Ruth. Ruth is quite an accomplished woman, and as are the other two women tonight too. But Ruth was a classmate of mine, and she is an attorney and partner with the Kremen Family Lawyers Group, specializing in family law with a specialty in child custody. Ruth has a very interesting story, and I'm not going to steal her airtime. She came to Amherst from Wellesley through the 12 College Exchange Program. She's currently living in Los Angeles, although tonight she's coming to us from Japan. She's with her husband on a book tour. And I would like to say, Ruth, welcome. I am so excited to have you on this panel, as you know. I have come over the time that we've gotten to know each other better, I have come to value something that I see very strongly in you, which is conviction, um, concern, um, awareness of the world, and an interesting ability to articulate what you think in an honest, direct, and sometimes provocative manner. So I have to say, I have been quite moved by some of our conversations together, and I would like to hear more about how you felt about Amherst. And let me just give you one question to begin with, which is, what was it that drew you to the Five College area, and more specifically to Amherst?
Um, so I got to Wellesley from Los Angeles, and I have to say that my background coming from Los Angeles was like pure hippie. I went to a high school that was founded by a bunch of Hollywood types that had been blacklisted during the McCarthy period. And my education was very strong on building domes and very weak on really serious kind of academics. And I went to Wellesley, and what I met there were women who were really serious second wave feminists. They were all, I think, ultimately the class of 76 graduated. More than half went to business school at Sloan, Harvard, and those kinds of business schools. And I didn't even know what the word business meant. But when I was at Wellesley as a sophomore, where I was unhappy. All of my friends were, and I made a lot of friends there. There were incredible women, but they were very, very, very driven. And I was just trying to find my way. And also my high school education was impoverished compared to these girls that had gone to prep schools. I just was kind of not keeping up. And so during my sophomore year, this wonderful guy named Steve Rauch was in my dorm on the 12 College Exchange. You're looking at his sister here on the screen. And he became my really close friend. And I was talking to Steve about how this doesn't seem like a good fit for me. I need more liberal arts and less like Hillary Clinton, where's my career going? I just was really floundering about how I was going to be successful in college. And he said, great, 12 College Exchange, come to Amherst. And so he was very influential in getting me to Amherst. And so I hope that Paula passes that on. Um, and so when I got there, I found something that the women at Wellesley didn't have the chance to have, which was a kind
Mm.
of 4 years of life of the mind. Now, this is all very, very 1970s culture. It would never replicate. The women were
Mm.
anxious. How am I going to break the glass ceiling? How am I going to get ahead? And they were very well educated when they got to Wellesley, and they were very driven to be a Hillary Clinton, the first president of the United States of America who's a woman. And that was not on my radar screen. And when I got to Amherst, what I found was a culture where people just wanted to learn. And they wanted to learn English literature, and they weren't striving, probably because they were men and they knew that they were going to get there anyway. And so I had a very particular and peculiar coming from my LA, like who's worried about anything but Marshall McLuhan, to Wellesley, where who's worried about anything except getting into Harvard Law, to Amherst, where I'm going to get into Harvard Law. It's not really a problem. I'm here to learn for now. And that's my story. When I got there, I found home. I just want to learn for now.
That's great, Ruth. That's great. I have a question, which is how would you describe the best of Amherst from your point of view? What do you remember most fondly?
I think it was the small literature classes that I took where, 15 people in a class and we were reading Styron or whatever we were reading in the class at the time. Fiction, poetry, and also I was an American history major, so my history classes as well. Um, I didn't completely get my act together at Amherst. I didn't find the right advisors sometimes. I was still kind of floundering around, but I made amazing friends, lifelong friends, more friends than I made at Wellesley by far, including with the women who transferred in. One of my very closest lifelong friends is Caroline Thompson, who was not in my class. She transferred from Harvard, and I just made amazing friends. I also was very, very close to the female faculty at Wellesley. And again, one of my lifelong friends is Rachel Kitzinger, who moved to Vassar, where Wendy was, because she didn't really feel accepted by the Amherst faculty. I think for the women, very young women faculty who are in their late 20s and very early 30s when they came to Amherst, they had a hard time. I personally didn't. I felt like I was welcomed in the classroom, welcomed by the other students, welcomed by all these people that were really curious and really interested and really smart. The Wellesley women were really smart too. I don't want to at all underestimate how smart they were. They were just smart in a way that was intimidating to me. And the men at at Amherst were much more relaxed and comfortable about being brainiacs. And so um, I just felt like I fit in better and I stopped feeling like I was behind. I got into classes where I felt like, okay, my high school education did, kind of um, even though the courses were called Modern Revolutions, I did kind of learn how to think in high school. And so Amherst was just a welcoming, easy place to be where you could be friendly with the faculty, you could make close friends. At least two of the people I see on the screen right now remain my very close friends. And it was a wonderful environment where I felt I, like the other students didn't resent me. They were happy for me to be there and I could kind of go at my own pace and I did really well at Amherst. So it was obviously a place that I thrived. It was a
Yeah.
good choice for me.
There's a classic picture of you in the oleo, which people may not remember, but I remember it because it's really striking, where you're kind of leaning back as if you're talking to somebody off camera. And I think you were in a lecture hall or something to that effect. But what always struck me about that picture is that you seemed so plugged in, like you were just talking to people, you know? And my question is, how did you find your people at Amherst?
Well, I was drawn to the young women faculty because what was I? I was 20 and they were 25. So it wasn't a very big age gap. So I think the first friends I made were Joan Dassin and Rachel Kitzinger, I think, because I wasn't studying in their fields, but they were close to my age. And so I became very close to them. I used to hang out in their houses off campus.
Yeah.
When Caroline came to campus, she had a whole friendship group, and I made a bunch of friends. I mean, Andrew's like, he's my friend from almost as soon as I got there. Oh no, he wasn't there the first semester. He was still in Russia, I think. But I don't know. I just made friends with Bob. I made friends with Paul. I made friends with people on the screen. In my dorm, I made a few friends, but I don't know. It wasn't hard to make friends. People were open. They were happy to have you there, and they've stayed with me, for the last 50 years. So thank you all.
That's something. Yeah, it's just amazing. I, unlike you, I actually have made more Amherst friends in the last 10 years than I did when I was actually at Amherst because of involvement with fundraising and stuff like that. But the people I've become friends with, I hold in such high regard and I care about so much. It's really, the Amherst people are special people, I think. I really do. I have a question about the culture. Was there anything you disliked?
Keith Leslie is also one of my friends. He's here somewhere, but we've been friends since college too. Um, what did I dislike? I don't think I actively disliked most. I did not go very close to fraternities. So none of my closest friends were in fraternities. Certainly my female friends who were very important to me, they're young faculty and they didn't go to fraternities. So in terms of like, Thursday nights, sometimes I would go occasionally to, a fraternity to hang out, but not that often. I think we kind of stuck more in small groups, hung out together. I was off campus a lot at, my young faculty friends' houses. Um, I I don't think anything was really bad. I loved going to Valentine and seeing everyone. So I don't have any criticisms. I didn't feel like there was any pressure at all for me to go do any particular thing at any particular time. And I found everyone on campus respectful and easy to speak to, and nothing really bothered me. I think I just found people. I found the campus. Um, I forget which fraternity Paul Schnell was in, but he was one of my good friends too. And I used to go to his fraternity. But if he's online, he can tell you what the name of it is. I forgot.
So it sounds like the transition for you was pretty easy and in fact a blessing after what you were experiencing at Wellesley. Is that right?
Well, I had Steve, so I already had a friend when I arrived.
Yeah, that
And
helps.
he was an upperclassman. Lovely, lovely person. Paula's shaking her head. He's my brother. So the transition wasn't that hard for me. I like came with a built-in friend. And so no, I was so happy to be there. I had no intention of staying, by the way. I was going back to Wellesley because I went to Wellesley because I was a feminist and I wanted to graduate from a women's college. And Dean Wall, he really wanted the women who were qualified to stay to stay. He didn't want the graduating class, the coeducated graduating class to be two people. I think there were only 9 of us as it was. So there was some pressure on people who had the GPA or whatever to stay to stay. But I wasn't going to stay because I wanted to graduate from a women's college. I was very committed to that. And I went into the lottery for a room at Wellesley, and I got a room in Tower Hall, which is the best dorm, over Lake Waban, the best room. I had the best lottery number. And not only that, I had a special Wellesley scholarship that summer before our senior year to go in a program, live in a house with other Wellesley women. And I was, I got to kind of be trained by I was interested in city planning, the Dorchester city planning and city planner in Boston. And I took all these Wellesley advantages and then went back to Amherst. So they didn't seem to care, but, I was torn. I really felt like I was betraying the women's movement in staying at Amherst, but it was so much of a healthier environment for me in every way that I stayed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and in so many ways, far from betraying the women's movement, you were actually leading it by becoming one of the first women at Amherst.
Yeah,
So,
but I wasn't one of my Wellesley classmates was the first CEO of General Mills. I mean, these were women that were going places. She was like, when I was at Amherst, but and I had a successful career, but not as a, feminist leader.
well, you've contributed your own share. And what I want to know is how did you go from city planning to law? And tell me a little bit about what you've been up to since you graduated from Amherst.
I I did something called the Coro Foundation Fellowship in Public Affairs right out of Amherst, which is a program that's run by something called the Coro Foundation, where they take 12 interns in 4 cities and they put you through like how to run a city. I did that for a year. Then I was a labor union organizer for 2 years. Then I decided to be a labor lawyer. I applied to law school. I went to Georgetown. I graduated from Georgetown. Then I got a great clerkship in the federal district court of the District of Columbia for an incredible judge, the first Black judge to be appointed to the federal bench in in the DC circuit, and his name was Judge Bryant, William Bryant. I clerked for him for a year, and then I got married. And my husband he wasn't American. He came from abroad. He had to get established here. It was hard because he didn't have an education that really made sense. And he got a postdoc um, at Harvard Business School. He's a professor of business now at USC. And then I started kind of following his career until ended up on the West Coast. I was already admitted to the bar, and I joined a small law firm, a fabulous small law firm, and I started doing a range of different things. And one of them was family law. Eventually, we moved back to my hometown, which is Los Angeles, and I joined a high school friend who had gone to Stanford Law and had decided to do family law. I joined her firm, and we formed a firm. And it was all by accident that I ended up as a family lawyer. But I have to say, I really enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. So it was a great career for me.
If you could think of one thing that you cherish most about your experience at Amherst, what might that be?
Um, I think it was a certain real appreciation for the liberal arts, passion, whether you were studying, Greek or Greek culture, or you were studying English literature, or all the things that I was interested in at the time, a passion for what you were interested in, and it could be anything. I also just want to say in closing that I've been having a lot of arguments with people lately about what college should be, why, and the value of liberal arts education when it's so expensive and so elite. And is it the way that society should be spending money, especially in these years where the academy is being attacked? And there's an effort on the part of our president to dumb down everyone, I think so, well, for a lot of complex reasons. Um, I value Amherst because I was enormously privileged to be able to experience an education like that. So few people have the luxury to do that ever. And more, the pressure is on younger people to specialize early and be very serious about what you're doing early and not get the kind of broad education I had. I think that we, as a class, we can think about whether the privileges that we got are something that just can't be replicated as time goes on. There isn't the money for it, the resources for it, or the value put in it. And kind of it's our responsibility, having benefited from it, to see what we can do to make sure that stays alive.
As I said, provocative, honest, direct, articulate. Ruth, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I'm going to move on now to Paula Rauch. Paula was my roommate in the social dorms, and that's such a cool thing to say. Like it was just yesterday, even though it was so long ago. Um, and Paul, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about yourself a little bit, but by way of background, uh, Paula Paula attended the Yukon Honors Program and then transferred to Amherst to join the class of 1977 as a major in biology and psychology. She received a medical degree from the University of Cincinnati, did a residency at Mass General, and completed a fellowship with the Cambridge Alliance. Importantly, Paula is the esteemed founding director of Mass General's Marjorie E. Korf Parenting at a Challenging Time, or PACT program. She's an author, she's an educator, she's a revered clinician, and Paula guides families and professionals in helping children cope with a parent's cancer. Paula, thank you so much for joining us, and I am so happy that we've kept in touch more recently, and I've been able to stay abreast of everything you've been up to. Tell us, you were at UConn. Why did you go there in the first place, and then why did you leave?
So, like everybody on this call, we each have sort of a personal story about what are the factors that came together to have us end up at Amherst. I also was told by Steve Rauch, my older brother, that it would be a great idea to go to Amherst. So, two of us were affected by him. But I grew up in the town of Amherst, so I graduated from high school early. I was eager to get out of town. My dad was a professor at UMass. He was the head of the zoology department, and I wanted to major in a science. I didn't want my dad to be the head of my department. And you paid in-state tuition if you were the child of a UMass faculty. So UConn was the place that had the best sciences, and that's where I went. And then the honors program was 50 kids, and we took half our classes in a little white house in the middle of a university, and most people went home on the weekends. The science classes were not in the honors program. They were huge lecture halls, hundreds of people, and then teaching assistants who, many of them were nice, but they were not particularly good teachers, or at least the ones that I had. Actually, one I can think of, cell biology, was great, but mostly not. And it just was across the board not a good fit for me. And, we're all, our experiences are placed in a point in time. And when I think about being what I thought of as a smart girl in the 1970s, one of the fun things for me about the current generation and many generations in between was that you could be both smart and popular. But that was not my experience in high school, and it was not my experience at the university. That it was sort of a negative thing to be a smart girl. And my favorite thing about being at Amherst was that I wasn't a smart girl anymore. I was just, a person, because everybody else was smarter than me, or so it seemed to me. And I loved the experience of being amongst people with all different interests. And so that for me was a huge draw. I also grew up at a time when I was thinking about breaking glass ceilings, but they were more in the sciences. I don't really have anything good to say about a lot of the experience of some of the faculty, and certainly some of the pre-med faculty at Amherst when it came to coeducation. It was a point in time where it seemed okay to make fun of the intellect of women. Some of them good-naturedly, some of them less good-naturedly. But when I was in medical school, I was working, giving tours of the medical school as a way to help support myself during those years. And the dean of the medical school took me aside and said, "Why do they let the dean at Amherst write those kinds of letters? There's no place else in the country that writes such lackluster and unpleasant recommendation letters for people." So since we're taping this, I won't say his name, but those who did the sciences would know him. So that wasn't a good thing, but taken in the context of the time in my life, I actually was kind of eager to prove people wrong. And so for me, it was actually in those settings, I bought too much into the idea that if I wasn't competing with men, I wasn't really competing. I don't think I took good advantage of the female faculty at Amherst because I was so eager to prove that I could do it um, against a male yardstick. And I look back at that time with some regret in that way. The vast majority of people, many of them on this call, were incredibly welcoming. I think most of the class of 76 thought that it was going to be a coeducational school sooner than it became one. And people were eager. I certainly had those experiences. I was on a panel talking in front of the Beta Society where someone asked me how it felt to have ruined the college. That was, you know, with all the the hubris of being 19, I said, I don't think I did. Uh, so for me, some of the negatives actually were positives, and they set me up, I think, for not being afraid to speak my mind for all the years that followed.
Did you get that vibe from the men that you knew, whether through classes or friends at the school, the ruin the college vibe?
Not at all. Not at all. The alumni, so I was asked to be on a bunch of alumni panels, and I think the alumni, Amrita probably knows better than me, but I think it was something like 70 or 80% of them opposed coeducation. Then they went ahead and coeducated the college and were on a campaign to try to help the alumni to be less disappointed and disgruntled. So most of the negatives, there were occasional things that people said, but really, I would say a very small percentage of them, of my male classmates. I can remember somebody saying it's not fair because the women aren't playing sports the way the men are, so you have more time to study. I can remember somebody saying, I can't imagine dating somebody that you'd wake up and see at breakfast. And I thought, thanks for the heads up. Like, um, how fast can I get away from you? But those were really the rare experiences. It was much more of a sense of being welcomed and accepted, and it was positive.
So, having been pre-med, did you find that Amherst encouraged your interest in pre-med and in going on into medicine? Did you find that it dampened it, or what kind of impact did it have, if any?
So I've told the story many times, but it made me think. The professors, the pre-med person in particular, was pretty clear that he didn't think I was the right material to be a physician, and I kind of at the last minute applied to medical school and went to Europe with Susan Sugar, our roommate. And it was back in the days when you couldn't just call somebody on a cell phone. You communicated by those blue aerograms. And I got a wire when we were in Nice that said that I had been accepted to medical school, and my mother accepted on my behalf and signed my name. And to this day, I am not positive whether I would have gone to medical school had my mother not said that I was going. I'm glad she did, but I wasn't so glad in Nice when I found out that was what was happening to me when I got back. So they did not encourage me, but the summer after, I can't remember now, it was either junior year, it was probably between junior and senior year. Because I think this is when I was like finally saying, well, let me just go ahead and try to apply. Because I had done all the coursework. Stephen George, I said to Stephen George, because I was doing research for him over the summer, do you think I could do this? Do you think I could go to medical school? And he looked me, straight in the eye and he said, are you kidding? Of course you can. And I think I've held on to that importance of being a mentor. When you trust somebody and you feel like they know you and they see something in you that you might not yet see in yourself, they can be transformative in life. And he did that for me. He was so confident that I could do it. And I trusted him. I believed him. And that was a turning point for me. So there were highs and lows in that arena.
Sure. If you had to think of one lasting, fond recollection or feeling or experience you have from Amherst with what would that be?
I think sitting on the lawn behind Valentine and just talking to people, especially the class of 76, that when you guys were finishing, many of you, your senior theses and talking about all these interesting things that you were doing. And I just felt like I was like so incredibly lucky to be immersed in a community of people who were so engaged in doing really different kinds of study. And I did my own science stuff, but a lot of my friends were not in the sciences.
Yeah.
And that I will remember incredibly fondly. And I think so much of the work that I've done clinically and professionally has been interdisciplinary. And I think much of what I learned at Amherst set me up to consult to cartoons and to do things, to talk to doctors of all different kinds of training. And I am enormously grateful to Amherst for having gotten me there.
You know, you've done some amazing things in your life to me. First of all, you've been a trustee for Amherst, and I think it must be interesting to see the college from that perspective as well as from the perspective of a student. But one of the things that I'd particularly like to hear about, and then I have to wrap it up, but is I'd love to hear a little bit more about what impact, if any, your Amherst experience had in your developing the remarkable medical program that you've directed, that is all about helping children deal with a parent's cancer. Did Amherst give you the mentoring, or did it happen to impact how you've led that program?
I think I also am a huge fan of liberal arts education, and the ability to make an argument for something, and to talk to people that don't agree with you about things. And I saw a need, and I was confident that I could make it happen because it needed to happen. And I think that started at Amherst. That belief that if you explained what you wanted to do, and there was a good reason for it, that people would listen to you. And I think the world has changed so much since we were students, and I think the learning to make an argument, not of the contentious sort, but of the sort that helps people to perspective take and appreciate something from another perspective, someone else's ideas, is just transformative in life. So I feel in that way Amherst had a hand in everything
Yeah.
that I've done since.
Paula, thank you. I love talking to you. I just find you very inspiring and calming, actually, which is saying a lot for me. So thank you so much for sharing some of your experiences with us tonight. And now I want to turn to our class of 1978 representative, Helene. And Helene, I was watching your face when the comment about sports was made, because apart from the fact that you have some other extraordinary accomplishments under your belt, I believe you and Ann Whitpen and Craig Riley and an additional person were all very involved in starting the first co-ed crew team at Amherst.
Yes.
How did
And
that happen?
well, first I want to start by saying, hey, everybody, and thank you all for this opportunity. It is lovely to see who's waving at me. Oh, hey, Frank. I am apologizing because I just wrote your name down. I'm apologizing because my computer just stopped working. And so I'm on my phone and I'm feeling a little awkward, but I will jump in. First of all, I have to say, I think I was probably the last person admitted to Amherst, that 75, 76 year. Was packing for Brown when Ed Wall called me and said I was off the wait list that I didn't know I was on. And so my dad and I did 3 round trips between Thayer Street and Memorial Hill and had lots of conversations about what would it be like to be a girl at Amherst. Having grown up at Dartmouth, I knew that it could never be as bad as that. So I decided to jump in. And the crew thing, I have a big regret that I want to say right here, particularly after hearing you, Ruth. I never knew any women professors the whole time, all 3 years that I was there, but I had some amazing professors and mentors, and I want to start by listing them, and then I will tell you about starting the crew. Um, Jeffrey Carr and Elmo Giordanetti in the French department took me from thinking French was just a thing you did because I half grew up in France to opening up to amazing intellectual depths and growths, and forced me to write a thesis about someone who challenged me every single day, Colette. Craig Riley and Hank Dunbar and Rick Griffiths were huge mentors for me. Rick was my professor, but Craig and Hank, now I'm going to cry, showed me that a theater jerk, not jerk, jock, could be an athlete too. And so we started the team because we were hanging out. Mary Gooding, the late Mary Gooding, and I were hanging out with a bunch of 79s. And Craig was a dorm advisor. And Craig said, I said something like, I don't know, I don't remember if you started it, Craig, or if I started it. But all of a sudden, the next day, we were at crew practice. And then that was that. We were completely accepted, embraced, taught, learned with a bunch of really incredible humans. And I really, Craig, now going to get gooby on you, but, and Hank, uh, give you so much credit for helping me be very brave physically. Because, I'd hiked, I'd biked, I'd all that stuff. But doing all this stuff with all these gizmos, I would go back to campus so refreshed. And when I was writing my thesis, Professor Carr would always start it with, and how was practice today? Because we would meet after. And he also just, I think, delighted in the fact that I, who had not really done anything strenuous, really was doing all this stuff. So thank you, Mr. Riley. And thank you also for the fact, I know I'm going round and round, so you're going to have to stop me with questions, but also for the fact that throughout my life, I have just never been afraid to work with gizmos since then. So I've coached crew, I've coached skiing, I've coached cross country skiing, and it's all because somehow that 19-year-old was able to jump in. So huge life lessons. And yeah, what else? That's now ask me a question.
Okay, so I've learned this is the way that Helene and I talk to each other.
Well, we do.
So I do have a question for you. First of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that your background is so unusual. You've run a travel company, for quite a long time. You closed it when your husband retired after 35 summers. And you've been a teacher coach in boarding schools, and you're now the executive director of the Rassias Center for World Languages and Cultures at Dartmouth. And you've worked all over the place. You've worked extensively with public school teachers in Hanover, New Hampshire, and in Mexico. And you have volunteer commitments that take you to Cambridge and in Hanover, and those have all involved some form of coaching. And I found it so
Right.
interesting that that your gratitude and the value you placed in the coaching you received has translated into your passing on that coaching skill and that love of coaching. And I almost don't know where to start with my questions, but I guess I'll start with the fact that I start with the question of, do you think of yourself as a director of a language program or as a coach who happens to direct a language program?
Well, first of all, I think Anne and Frank and Gary too, I think, and maybe Craig also, you had to know my dad first. And that he was kind of the ultimate take what you're doing, which for us happens to be language. I just sold a program today because I said to somebody, I don't care if we're teaching you tiddlywinks, we're teaching you how to communicate. And I think what the sport did for me was take my theater background, take my growing up in France and the US background, and help me put it in a box. How do you inspire people? How do you, if you know thyself, right? Very first tenet of teaching. I knew once I started being coached by various folks at Amherst that my know thyself when I present to people is as a coach. And so that's it. I put all this stuff together, but I will always go back to the fact that I don't think I would be as good as at what I do if I hadn't been a Division III athlete so late in life, because it was a life discovery. Because I was a complete theater jock, 100%. But I said in my interview, the guy said to me in my interview, the fellow, it wasn't Ed, but he said, what would you change about yourself? And I said, I would stop the theater for at least a year just to see who I really am, said that 18-year-old. And here I am.
Yeah, here you
So,
are. Tell us about the program at Dartmouth.
so it's pretty fun. So again, so my dad had this teaching method. He's been gone for 10 years that well, Dartmouth likes to promote it. It's part of their brand for sure, for sure, for sure. And what we do, so they use it in the classrooms. Assistant teachers are formed and mentor one another in the classroom. It's a big part of Dartmouth life. It's a badge of honor to get up at 7:45 in the morning to get drilled by somebody. But what he also put together was a really intense and exciting group of reinforcement techniques that are just all about humanity. It's ironic now because every other word in education is communicative, human-centered design. And he'd been doing that for a super long time. So what we just do is work with teachers to give them more, to help sustain them in their classrooms. And I was telling the smaller group before when we started that I'm going to be going to Canada, to Quebec in November, driving 9 hours straight north to work on a First Nations Canadian reserve for language revitalization program. So we work with anybody that needs that kind of help. The program in Mexico was killed by COVID, but I would say that is in the last 15 years the most exciting thing we've done, because we had an amazing study done by us by the Inter-American Development Bank where they proved that a sustained teacher, imagine, so logical, a sustained teacher is a happy teacher and can influence kids even that much more. I know that's dumbing it down, but it was a real boost for all of us, because then the Mexican, yes, we worked with the Mexican government. We were able to work within the public school system. And we worked with people. What I love about the techniques and what I love about this philosophy that Dad generated, because his program started with the Peace Corps. So it's this thing that's born from urgency, right? And so we were able to work with people who literally had latrines instead of bathrooms in their schools, to people who were working for lab schools as well. And so it just lovely. So yeah, sorry. That's what we do.
Thank you. That's not just what you do. That's really impressive. If you think about Amherst all these years later, is there one memory or one occasion or experience that sticks with you more than anything else and kind of warms your heart and makes you think good thoughts about Amherst?
I'd say there are two, because I have to go back to Professor Carr, because I cannot tell you how marvelous it was to get off the river, run to the garden, stuff something in my face, and go meet him in his office, because he would meet me at night. And and just be there in the lamp glow, just trying to put this thing together and having him not lose his mind over working with me. And we remained very close friends till he died. And same with Professor Giordanetti. But also, I think if you say Amherst to me, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I will go to any of our boats. Hey, Anne. And for me, it's not even the beautiful days where we rowed long rows and giggled and gossiped and we're just a bunch of, 9 girls in a boat. But for me, someone says Amherst and I have very cold hands, and there are, at least as a metaphor, ice cubes dripping from them, because that was when I think I awakened to sort of saying to myself, oh yeah, you're tough, right? So that means, what does that mean? It doesn't just mean those 9 girls. It means all the rest of the crew. It means all the guys and all the motors and all the coaches. So yeah, I would say a blend of academics and this sport that I never thought I would be able to do.
Helene, you are so cool. I heard you were cool, and I can see why. I can see why. Ladies, thank you all three of you for spending this time talking with us tonight. And I believe we've got some questions that have come from the people who are listening. So I will turn things over to Steve.
Thank you, Wendy, and the three of you. Again, I echo Wendy's thoughts. Thanks for all of your interesting reflections about Amherst in your life today. We've got a bunch of really great questions, and trying to sift through them. There are 3 or 4 that I'd like to get to and ask each of you to respond a couple of minutes to these. So, Ruth, Paula, and Helene, let me start with a question from John Hayes. I see John there. You're still with us. John says, my recollection is that the college didn't do much to prepare for the major changes that coeducation would necessarily bring to Amherst's all-male, predominantly prep school culture, such as the fraternity culture, but instead saw coeducation as more of an extension of the existing 12 college exchange program. John said, I'd be interested in the panelists' thoughts on this. Ruth, you want to start?
I kind of don't know what to say because, as I said before, my life at Amherst had very little to do with the fraternity culture. It had to do with my courses, my professors, and my friends. And my friends that I first made my first year, some were in fraternities, and I did sometimes go with I had no problem. I didn't go to all the fraternities. I went to a few where I had friends. By the time the second year rolled around and there were more women on campus, I had more friends, and the fraternities never bothered me. I believed that was they were organizations for people that wanted that kind of friendship group, that wanted that place to be comfortable. And I found myself comfortable in Rachel Kitzinger's living room off campus, and that everybody just should be who they wanted to be. Um, so I can't really address that. I was never offended by fraternity culture because I never went near it. I didn't feel I never felt intense sexism on campus, and I never felt resentment for the fact that the school had gone co-ed, although I do understand intellectually that there was some reticence and even some aggressive rejection of the concept by my classmates and the classmates ahead of me. I never felt that I was affected by that, either in my classes, in my friendship groups, when I was, when I was eating the meals with everybody else. So maybe I'm the wrong person. I kind of created my own Amherst cocoon where I felt comfortable and happy. And I got a lot of attention from my professors, and I felt like I was learning, and I felt like people were there to learn and not to just get ahead, as I explained the women at Wellesley were doing, although I respected them. I just couldn't keep up. So at Amherst, it was more about the life of the mind, not the life of your professional life going forward. I felt really comfortable there, and the rest of it didn't bother me, I have to say. I don't know what, that's it. Thank
No,
you.
thank you. I'm going to break the mold here. And hey, John, you asked the question. Can you unmute? My sense, and then Paula, you respond to it. My sense, John, is that what you're suggesting is that the college could have done more to prepare for coeducation. You want to clarify that, and then Paula, you jump in and respond to
Sure.
John.
I wasn't necessarily talking about other students, but more the college and the idea that, okay, it's Amherst and now we just add women, but we don't have to change anything. We can have an all-male glee club. We can have all-male fraternities. We can still have the relationships we had with Smith and Holyoke. That the culture really didn't change by the inclusion of women being there. And I think my sense is it took several years, and maybe there being freshmen women coming in.
Mm.
I just remember thinking, well, the college, we'll just add some security lighting, and that's all the changes we have to make for the college to now
Okay.
be co-ed.
Okay. Paula, thanks, John. That helps to clarify. Paula, what do you think about what John said?
So I think I think a lot of what you're saying resonates for me. I think that first year when you guys were seniors, or the class of 76 were seniors, I believe there were 14 men to every woman on campus.
My God.
So you didn't feel that exactly because there were women from Smith and Mount Holyoke and Hampshire College who were on campus. But there was very little that it seemed like anyone was doing in anticipation. I remember many of the women talking about where you could find women's bathrooms, various places. There was kind of like, things that you just needed, the insider's guide. The following year, when I was a dorm advisor and there were freshmen, it was intentional that they didn't accept freshmen. They wanted not to have someone starting their college experience being outnumbered by upperclassmen that were male. So the idea was they were accepting a hardy group of women spread out through the class, and that we would be there as mentors or supports for the freshman women coming in. But I think there were a lot of things that were difficult. Certainly as a dorm advisor, I oversaw for my freshman rush night at Amherst, and that was insane. There were no set up rules for it, and people had not sort of taken into consideration what it would mean to have women at the different fraternities or not. And someone decided that no fraternity could have only fewer than 4 women. So it was either you had to sort of have a group of women, not just one. And there was quite a lot of hoopla around certain fraternities wanting only the women that they thought were pretty, and not wanting the women that wanted to go together as a group. And by the end of an evening of a lot of jockeying around and a good bit of crying, there was only one fraternity that had women for the following year. And I think these fraternity names have eluded me over the last 50 years. I think it was Phi Gam. Is that the root beer float one? They accepted anybody that would come. So I think that, if I remember correctly, they were the only ones that had women the next year. So that was difficult. What struck me was 15 years into coeducation, I had a group of women, because there was a senior who was doing her senior thesis. I think of the book that she wrote was called The Ferris College, or The College on the Hill, or something like that. But those women 15 years later referred to themselves as Amherst students. Nobody I knew ever referred to themselves as an Amherst student. We were always Amherst women. And to me, that was the biggest change. Took 15 years to become just an Amherst student and not an Amherst woman.
Okay. Helene, you want to respond to John's comments and questions?
Yeah, don't look at me. I think I'm totally clueless. As I said, I grew up at Dartmouth. My last 2 years of high school, I watched my friends and my father's students be tormented and tortured and totally not accepted. I had a friend from high school who had a rock thrown through her window with the most odious note attached to it. So, yeah, I knew it was going to be hard, but I didn't think that people weren't going to be gentle people. Um, and again, I had my cocoon of the team and a lot of like-minded people. And oh yeah, I partied a lot. Sorry, Craig. Um, and so I felt, I had already done the Dartmouth fraternity thing because I graduated early from high school and the drinking age was 18. So socially, I just think I blundered about, but I didn't feel oppressed in any way because I was 2 hours north. I knew what was going on, and I felt like, I mean, oh my gosh, I even went one time. I was so mad that President Ward had not shown up at our first intercollegiate race. By the way, first intercollegiate team, lest we forget. And thank you, Ann. And I went marching into his assistant, and I think she thought something terrible was about to happen, and she let me right in. And I kind of yelled at him. And then I wish I had this because he wrote me the most elegant note saying, I am so sorry that I missed your race. And I think he did come to one, didn't he, Annie? Or two. And so I kind of feel like I'm saying really trite things and that I was just a clueless child of privilege. Eesh. But that, there we go.
I'm
Yeah,
not
can I
convinced that the men were taken care of very well at Amherst either.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean,
one more comment? Because I think that the way John posted is really very thoughtful.
Yes.
I came from Wellesley College where there wasn't a single man on campus, and I had a friend who was in the Five College Exchange, and Wellesley did nothing for the men there. I had no expectation that Amherst, when I came on the 12 College Exchange program, was going to do anything for me. It was my
Mm,
choice to go to an all men's college. However, and so staying there for the first year, there were 9 women in our class. I I really did not understand, and I really respected President Ward. I didn't have any expectation that they were going to be able to turn the college around in 6 months. That was going to be a long process of which I was kind of not ever going to really benefit. But
mm,
I do believe that what John's observed is right. They probably in later years didn't really think long and hard about what it meant to bring women into that culture. And that was an
mm,
important thing. But for me, I felt I was an interloper and a freeloader, and I stayed because it was good for me. And I wasn't in a position to criticize the college.
okay,
I was too new.
A
okay.
couple more things.
Ru- Yeah.
I also want to, so Gary, Kelly, Frank, Charlie, and I may have missed anybody, but and obviously you, Anne, but I felt like I had an interesting support group of yeah, I didn't think about all that stuff, Ruth. But I felt that I was supported by people, that I could go to people and, bitch a little bit, but mostly I, but yeah, just a kid in college in a lot of ways.
Mm. Can I
Yeah.
shift? I wanted to get to another important question, shift this a little bit. Many of us, I know in 76, and I gather all of us, are beginning to think about Amherst and the entire arc of our lives as we are reaching this next chapter of our lives. Drawson Wilson asked a very thoughtful question I wanted to share with the group and see if you're willing to give us your thoughts. Drawson asked, we are hearing from women of courage who came to Amherst in groundbreaking ways. Would you be willing to share what other moments in your life called for similar such courage? Drawson, thanks for the, as always, thoughtful question.
Um, can I start?
Helene? Go ahead.
Yeah, no,
Helene, just
jumping in. I started a company knowing nothing, except that I had taken some boarding school kids to France two times. And I ended up just kind of doing it, but it was definitely professionally the hardest thing I've ever done, because partially I still looked like I was 19, and I had to deal with a lot of French, totally unbelievably or believably sexist vendors, school principals, every man. One time I even I had one of my employees with me, long story, we blah blah blah. I'm in a restaurant trying to feed 40 people on an emergency. And I actually went flashing back to school. I truly did, no lie, because the gentleman said to my employee, who was a guy, while we talk about this, would Monsieur like a beer and would Madame like some tea? And I very carefully said, Madame is the boss and she would like a beer. And it was so classically, oh, wait, I can do this. I can do this. And so, yeah, that was super, super, super hard, and it all worked out. And I don't know if I had gone to Brown, I would have been that person. So,
yeah, yeah. Paula, Ruth,
I think that for me, the closest relevant experience is that after I finished my Coro program 1 year after Amherst, I signed on with SEIU Local 99 to organize the non-teaching employees of the Los Angeles Unified School District into a union, SEIU Local 99. And I had to go around and meet with the janitors in my district, and they were all men, most of them minority men. And I had to address them as a 23-year-old about, what is collective bargaining and why would you want to join a union? All men, okay? And I said, okay, Amherst trained me for this. I could walk into a room of all men, 10 years older than me, all different races, all different backgrounds, and I could talk to them with confidence that the men would understand me. And I think that Amherst gave me that confidence.
Paula.
I mean, I think it's an interesting thing about courage. It didn't feel to me like I was courageous at Amherst. It felt to me like I was doing what I wanted to do. And if that, even if the people around me didn't always think that what I wanted to do was the appropriate thing to do, and that happened many times in my career. As a child psychiatrist, I mean, if you want to pick a specialty where you're held in high regard, generally you don't decide to be a psychiatrist. And so there were many experiences where I knew I had something important to bring to the table, and I believed in what I had to say. And I thought it was in the interest of the patients that I cared for, the teams that I worked on. I did a lot of work with the military. And I wasn't always a good fit for the hierarchical thinking that goes into working with the military. But I have enormous respect for the people who serve and I believe that the people that I worked with in an ongoing way also came to have respect for me. And so if that's it feels like the mission matters to me, and Amherst partially helped me to be mission driven. And once you see the mission, then the courage follows the mission.
Interesting.
Steve, I'd love to jump in if I can.
Please. Yeah, Wendy, thank you.
Briefly. It took courage for me to go from Vassar, which I had really been pining to go to really a completely unknown situation. I knew that Amherst was an excellent college. I had no questions about the academic skills I would develop there, but I really didn't know what I was getting into in terms of culture and so on. And it took a lot of courage for me to make that move because there were a lot of unknowns in my life at that time. And when I got to Amherst, I think it was Ruth who mentioned learning how to think. And I have to say, I've heard this from other folks as well, that one of the things Amherst taught me, and specifically, I mean, there were several professors I have great gratitude towards, but one of them was Armour Craig, sorry, Armour Craig. And I thought he was a very imposing body. He was a big guy, and you know, he was Shakespearean, and I was quite intimidated by him. And I remember taking a Shakespeare class with him and thinking, you know, in my own preconception, unfortunately, I'm just going to be this little, you know, coed, which is what I remember being called. I was just this coed sitting in the Shakespeare class, and you know, there with all these brainy guys. And um, at one point, Craig liked to give pop tests, and he'd have you write about, in particular, he'd have you take a portion of a Shakespearean play or whatever it was we were working on. And he'd say, now, what was the character thinking at this point? What's going on here? And he would then have you write a blue book about it and turn it in. And I somehow, very early on in that class, was able to see how he was thinking and how he analyzed the development of the characters and what they were communicating with each other. And just that one class, which I was so lucky to have taken, taught me skills about analysis and about human communication that I've used my entire life. Just being able to see how to get inside of what's going on between two or more people and what is the communication that's being sent. And I was I really got into learning to look at things that way. And I was so grateful because I got an A in the course, which further gave me the courage to try thinking about things from a new perspective. And I've used that throughout.
You know, it's clear that there are two big buckets of things that you all seem to be talking about. One, Wendy mentions the many skills, but secondly, and in some ways as important, the bucket of what it means to be a human being, what it means to develop character throughout our lives. Mark Green, in our class of 76, posed, I think, a very interesting question as we get toward the end, and there are still a few more if we have time. Mark reminds us all that the class of 76 will help fund the staircase in the new student union, and it's in honor of coeducation. Mark asks, what motto or logo would you recommend we inscribe there, given your experience at Amherst? So all four of you, you want to take a stab at that?
Well, Anne, you got to jump in on this one too. Wow.
It's great, but it's such a wonderful idea. I'm kind of moved by that. But I think I would need some time to think about it.
You know.
Because it combines something about the incredible education in liberal arts education Amherst offered, which was absolutely the most excellent I can imagine any college giving, and how in today's world it's so difficult to maintain that because of the fear and the careerism and the anxiety and that we just didn't have to have in our generation. And I look at the generations, you know, that are much younger than us, our children, even our grandchildren that are not old enough yet, but getting there for some. And they didn't live with that kind of anxiety. And we didn't live with the kind of anxiety they're living with. So I think maybe it's such a great idea. I can't, thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
But something about, you know, our hope for the future, that the ideals that we were lucky enough to get from Amherst about how we can live as humans can be conveyed to future generations.
Yeah.
Since we have the four of you here, your you know, 3 minutes, 4 minutes of brainstorming from the four of you could be amazing to incorporate into this process. So let's push that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Ruth and Paula and Anne and Helene. This has huge potential.
It
You were
truly
there.
does.
There's
Yeah.
something, for me, there's something about, so I was on the board during the time that Amherst became a more diverse socioeconomically and racially than it was in the time that we were there. And the first campaign where people were talking about lives of consequence, to me, what was recognized when we were brought into the mix of the college is that lives of consequence are not found on the Y chromosome. I don't think that's what it should say on the stairs. Let me be clear. But there's something about the way in which the college actively seeks and recognizes that the potential for lives of consequence come from all corners of our society, and that's something that I at least hope we started a little bit with coeducation and continues to be
Mm.
a value of the college.
You know, I also wanted to jump in, and our president, Charlie, just sent me a message and echoes what I was going to suggest. Rob Cushman's idea is fantastic. Given our time limit, I would suggest that for anybody on this call, if you want to share your thoughts on Mark Green's question that can help us really think about what that staircase could represent, please send them to any of us in this class who you've received messages from. That would be helpful. I wish we had more time to dive into it, uh, but Helene, you haven't, and Wendy, do you want to take a quick minute and they'll respond to Mark's comment, our question about what ought to go on that staircase?
I would respond by saying that I would like to invite Helene and Anne and Ruth and Paula to sit in on one of our conversations about the reunion when we're talking about the steps, or separately have a brainstorming session with Bob Howard and whoever he thinks might be appropriate. Give everybody some background on the steps project, a little bit of thought material, and then get together and do an online brainstorming and see what we can come up with. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Maybe we can send a note to everybody just expressing that. So thanks.
I also just want to say how great it is and how grateful I am to be in the presence of people from my class, but also from the class of 77 and 78. I mean, it's really extraordinary because Steve, you and I thought very initially in our first conversation about the idea of something for the class of 76. And here an opportunity is opened up to even further connect with the college and make new friends. And it's just a great example of the power of the Amherst relationship, in quotes, that it has the power to take you so many places. And I'm very, very grateful for everybody who participated and attended tonight.
Can I just ask one other person, Amrita Basu, Professor Basu, are you still with us? Maybe not. Okay. I was going to ask her for a minute to talk a little bit about what her students have been finding. Bob Howard asked the question, how does this connect to the research that her students have been doing? And how does this relate to the Amherst of today? We'll hear more about that, I'm sure. And certainly for our 50th reunion, we plan to have some kind of, well, there will be obviously many programs on coeducation, and those kinds of questions and comparisons will come up. I think, in closing, it's interesting what I've been hearing is about all of our experiences while we were there. But I think some of the reflections we've been having at this stage of our life, I asked the question, I think that echoes everybody's, that's how has age and experience reinforced or changed our perspective about the meaning of an Amherst education? And in some ways, Uh, that's an important question that underscores an awful lot of what we've been talking about tonight. And someone earlier mentioned, I think it was Ruth early on, the life of the mind. And it's just marvelous to hear that still being mixed up in the way that we're talking about it today. And I'm so glad that we all could spend this time and keep that alive. So, on behalf of all of 76 Connects and the class of 76, again, we're delighted to have had these four women join us, delighted to have had the experience of coeducation come our way. And this has been thought-provoking, I know, for everyone. Um, I appreciate all of your time, your contribution, and let's keep the conversations going, okay? All of you, good night and stay well, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.